Welcome back to the Flex Diet Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Mike C. Nelson. On this podcast, we talk about all things to increase hypertrophy, performance, improve body composition, do all of it within a flexible framework without destroying your health. Today on the podcast, we've got my buddy from the land down under of kangaroos and wombats, Mr. Ben Mayfield Smith. We're talking all about the concept of grit. So there's a little bit more on the psychological side of training. We talk about what are the fundamentals of grit and perseverance. What is the real role of mental toughness and a growth mindset? Also about strategic struggling, stress adaptation, long-term development, ego versus mastery of the goal, physiologic and psychological toughness, different ways you can build this, aka I'm a big fan of cold water immersion for this, and a whole bunch of other really useful stuff. So always enjoy talking to my buddy Ben, and I think you'll get a lot out of this podcast. So I think if you're like me, I do find the physiology side to be utterly fascinating. But when you work with clients, you also realize a huge portion of it is on the psychological, on the mental side. And even if you don't train anyone, this applies to your own training yourself also. So I think you'll enjoy this podcast. If you want to learn more, we've got the Flex Diet certification. It is opening again for 1 week only, starting June 16th on Monday. So that's coming up very soon. Hop onto the newsletter for all of the information. That is going to be the best place. We've got some fast action bonus items going out there. So if you're looking for complete information on primarily nutrition and recovery, this is the one for you, using the concepts of metabolic flexibility and flexible dieting. So I have it broken down into 8 different interventions, everything from your macronutrients, protein, fats, carbohydrates, but we also include things on micronutrition, NEAT, which is non-exercise activity, thermogenesis, walking around, movement, exercise, sleep, fasting, and much more. We also have a ton of expert interviews for everything from protein with Dr. Stu Phillips, Dr. Jose Antonio, Dr. Mike Ormsby, flexible dieting with Dr. Peter Fitchen, sleep with Dr. Dan Party, metabolic flexibility with Hunter Waldman, and many other ones there also. So all the information you can find on the newsletter. We'll put a link down there below to hop on that. And if you're interested in being in a state of ketosis, but you don't want to do a ketogenic diet, which I would say I don't blame you unless you have some pathology you're working with your physician on, check out my friends over at Tecton Ketone Esters. They have a beverage that'll put you into a state of ketosis within about 20 minutes. So each can contains 10 grams of a ketone ester. They use an exclusive ester that is the BHB molecule bonded to glycerol. I've been able to use it for quite a while. I am biased, so I'm a scientific advisor to them and an ambassador. They've got some really cool stuff coming out. It was supposed to be out this spring, but it'll probably be out early this fall. Again, I can't say what it is, but I think you'll be really excited about that. But in the meantime, they have their current ketone ester available. Use the code Dr. Mike to save 20% at the code down below in the link. And then we also have our sponsor Element. I'm drinking some raspberry Element right now, especially coming up. It's going to be summer. Well, it is summerish here in Minnesota. And surprisingly, it can get pretty hot and humid. So I find just having more sodium and electrolytes makes a huge difference, especially training in the garage gym. So check them out below and stay tuned for the Flex Diet certification opening June 16th. Hop onto the newsletter. Enjoy the podcast here with my good buddy down under, Ben Mayfield Smith, all about grit and beyond. Hello.
Hello, sir.
How are you?
Good, how you doing?
Good. Good. I was gonna say, good morning, Captain.
Mate, how did the client go? She absolutely looked like she crushed it.
She did great. It was funny. She sent me an email. And all these girls around me are freaking out about, oh my God, I haven't drank water in 2 days. And and feel like I'm drinking too much water and I felt pretty good. And
It's always funny when you have the old school sciences and they're like, oh, I cut all my carbs out for this and I pulled down sodium to nothing and I did the you're
yeah,
like, why are you still doing
yeah.
that?
Yeah, I remember talking to John Berardi about this back in 2006. No, not even before that. I think it was 2003. And asking him, I'm like, so I don't do any bodybuilding prep, but why did they do these weird, stupid things? Because from a physiology standpoint, I'm like, this makes no sense. He's like, you're right. It makes no sense.
Yeah. The more you try and make sense of it, the more frustrating it becomes.
Yeah, because at the time I'm thinking, oh my God, what are these like secret things I'm missing? Or there's some way to hack or trick the system, or there's some other renin aldosterone angiotensin system I'm just not aware of or something. And he's like, no, you're not.
Honestly, I've had these, and you're 20 years before me, but I had these same like landings where I'm like, hang on, this doesn't make sense from a physiological perspective, psychological perspective, nutritional perspective, biochemistry, neurotransmitter. What am I missing here? Am I missing something drastic that doesn't make sense that I just don't know about yet? So therefore, I don't think to ask it. And then the more I've got through it, I'm like, no, that just doesn't make sense. It just fails to make a logical conclusion. And you still see them do it, and you're like, what the fuck is happening? I had a client mad at me because there was people backstage that were eating blocks of chocolate and chocolate muffins, and I had him having very strict pre-prepared nutritional meals that he like cream of rices, rice cakes, like nut butter spread, stuff that he's already processed, digested in the past. I'm like, why would you want to throw in a random block of chocolate when we've tested this and you didn't like your look was what we wanted? Now because you're backstage, you're like, oh, but this guy's doing this. I'm like, oh, just put your blinders on and shut up.
Yeah. Well, that's like with all athletes. Like for when I first started, I'm like, oh my God, if you're coaching high level athletes like the week before the big competition, like there's all this stuff that goes into it and there must be all these little secret things or not. And then you realize 95% of it is all the stuff you did up to that point. Just don't screw it up. And then you're going to spend
Yeah.
95% of your time just trying to talk them out of the stupidest shit known to man, like the
Yep.
week before. And I get it,
Yep.
like having done some lower level competitions, it's psychologically, it's the weirdest thing to think. All of a sudden, these ideas you would not have tried 8 weeks ago, they sound like, well, maybe this will get me the extra 0.5%. Like your brain is almost like not thinking of the risk at all to any of it. And like most of what I
But
do is just tell them, we're not doing anything different. If we haven't tested it, we're probably not going to do it unless we think something's really off track and then we have to take some risks. Okay, let's try to not be in that position. But if we are, okay, then we'll look at it. But most of the time it's no, just don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that.
yep, stop trying to introduce things. If you haven't done it yet by now, you probably don't need to do it, and it's not going to be this magical Hail Mary that you think it is. And usually the risk profile is so much higher physiologically than it is, but they think because they saw someone else do it on Instagram once that they need to do it, and they're missing out, even though you've structured and strategized everything to make sense. Oh, this week where I think it's because so many people have glorified the peak week that it's
Oh
like this
yeah.
magical redefining structural change that's going to bring out all this muscularity and vascularity that you don't have if you just get this peak week right. Well, if you just get prep right, the peak week is just emphasizing what you've already done. So I don't need to do anything different in the peak week, really, other than what we've already tested and tried. And if it worked, just do it. But you think throwing this Hail Mary 70-yard throw is going to somehow pay off, and you have no experience doing that. So why would we do it? Why would we risk this look that we know works for a look that we have no idea? And it might make a 2% variance, but the risk is that it ruins 50%. But you're like, oh, it has a 2% potential positive. And somehow that's the logical conclusion they make during the back end where all the work is done. You're like, just switch your brain off, let me do the job. You just do what you're told, stick to the schedule, and shut up.
Yeah. I do think a lot of it still comes from like we talked about, like enhanced bodybuilders using all sorts of different drugs. And yes, some of those drugs are going to have side effects of water retention and all that kind of stuff. But even then, at a professional level, with all of that and supposedly being coached by professionals, like how many top level enhanced bodybuilders, physique athletes still don't do it right? You know what I mean? For this show or that show. And I get it. You have a lot of moving variables and all that kind of stuff. It's not as easy. But even I think that's where a lot of it trickles down from, because not so much in now, but especially in the past, like a lot of the top gurus made their name as, oh, this is the guy or gal that's going to get you in shape and you're going to look like this on stage. And they have one thing that goes well, and that's the poster child they hold up to everyone else.
Yeah.
And you don't see the road littered with all the bodies that they just destroyed or didn't turn out well.
Literally, yeah, it just becomes this guy gets glorified on YouTube or Instagram, and they only show the wins and never the losses. And the funny part is, I ask new coaches, is like, where have you failed? Where have you gone wrong? Where have you
Yeah.
stuffed up? Because that'll tell me a lot more. And usually it's like, where have you like dropped the ball and corrected yourself? Because like you said, the amount of times they'll use one or two genetic outliers that just nail everything, or no matter what you throw at them, they're going to nail it anyway. The body is going to be responsive, it's hypersensitive,
Hmm.
highly adaptable to androgen receptors, it's highly adaptable to drug loads, it's highly adaptable to training volume stimulus, and it just simply responds. They're not the ones you base your peak strategies on or your prep strategies on, because they're the ones that were going to do it no matter what. It's
Yeah.
like, that's not your success story. It was an inevitable story. You just happen to be the coach that got that client. Let's be very honest. If you're in a prep and you have Chris Bumstead, chances are no matter what you do, he's going to rock up there and look good. Now
Yeah.
you can get those 0.1% out of him because he's a high performer and that adds up. But for the most part, like if I had Phil Heath, Ronnie Coleman, Chris Bumstead, genetically, no matter what I throw at the kitchen sink, it's gonna stick and something will pay off. And all of a sudden, hey, I'm the greatest coach in the world because I got these guys ready. To be honest, they were probably going to be ready regardless of what I did. That's what we call the survivorship bias, right? Like back in World
Yeah.
War II, they used to look at the bombers that were returning and adding additional armor to the planes, going, oh, this is where the gunshots are. We need to reinforce it. And this engineer goes, well, actually, let's look at the planes that aren't returning. Let's reinforce the lapses in the armor from where they're not surviving. And they would recall that they would drag out the planes from the English Channel, and the planes were crashing because they're being shot down. And they'll go, well, we're looking at the wrong thing. We're looking at the planes that are returning. Yes, they're being shot at, but they're still surviving. How about we look at the planes that aren't coming back and start to find where those problems are? Those are the clients in peaks, the preps that you need to look at and go, well, let's not just look at these genetic anomalies that are going to nail it no matter what, just because whatever is thrown at the body's like, cool, thanks, I'm going to use this. Let's look at the ones that are actually dropping like flies and not getting on, not making it to stage, or completely missing the prep, or completely missing their volume landmarks, and they're training like they can't even recover because you've thrown 200 sets a week at them, plus supersets and drop sets and cluster sets and everything else. Like they're the ones we have to assess and study and go, okay, how do we not make that mistake?
Yeah. Yeah. Side note, I'm also recording the podcast. I find all the intensity techniques, I think, are also vastly overused. There's a time and a place for them, and I use some of them, but I don't know. It just seems like there's that, oh, I want to know the secret length and partial and
Mm-hmm.
range of motion. It's, bro, you're curling 15-pound dumbbells. Like, how about you
Yeah.
curl 20-pound dumbbells and we start there? Yeah, if you're super advanced and you need a different stimulus and you want to add a few of those things in, hey, great, that's fun. But I don't know. It's just funny how often I just go back to just basic, boring
Yep.
training, different rep ranges. Because all even like the natural competitors I know who do physique stuff, like all of them are really strong. I can't think
Yeah.
of an exception, both males and females. Now they're not powerlifter strong, but compared to the average person in the gym, they're way stronger. So let's just go in that direction.
Yeah, I hold a very similar philosophy. Like I would rather, usually when I see a drop set, it's no greater generation of stimulus than if you simply rested longer and had a complete set the next set that comes,
Right.
rather than adding the drop set, the cluster set, the giant set. If you were to take that 3 minute rest instead, not only would you not need to do length and half reps or half partials, or you wouldn't need to do a superset, you would probably get a greater load generation because you've recovered between the two sets,
Yeah, it's higher quality
replenished
work.
ATP, and got better quality work. And then it becomes quality over quantity. You don't need to do 50 reps. You just need to do 12 good ones. which long term I look at, they talk about like fatigue accumulation and that sort of thing. But long term, yes, 6 to 30 reps all produce the same level of hypertrophy, but I can almost guarantee doing 30 reps of something every session you're in the gym for the next 10 years is going to have greater recruitment of load on your joints than if I did 12 or 6 or
Mm-hmm.
8 or 10. That's where it starts to get to me like 50 set drop sets when I can just have a good set of 12 to 15, rest, repeat, and be done makes more sense. And I have better control of that stimulus.
Agree. Awesome. So today we're going to talk about grit. Is that right?
Yeah, I was really excited when I saw you guys. I've got some I would say hot takes on grit, but yeah, when I saw that you guys were at the Ducksworth presentation, what was that summit for? What was that? That was a
Yeah, so it was through so it's through Parker University. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them, but I hadn't really heard much about them, ironically, until was it last year? Yeah, last year we were down at the Rapid had a meeting down in Dallas, and Andy Gelpin had just taken a job working at Parker remotely, and they have this beautiful facility. They're building a whole new research area, like equipment, like they have a gyro. I'll think of the specific name, but basically, I've used it for my own neuro rehab. But you sit in the seat, and it can spin you in basically XYZ any orientation you want. So for vestibular rehab, I don't know the price of the machine. I think it's like $250,000 or something like that. It's super expensive. They're like
yep.
gyro stim. Yeah, let's get two of them. So just crazy amount of stuff there. And so Park University had a conference there in Vegas. And so that actually turned out to be a couple days before the Cav Mastermind. So it literally was directly before it. So I'm
That's
like,
fantastic.
oh, so we didn't go to a ROM's event. The Real Coaches Summits were all going to be down here in South Padre. Yeah, so we went to the Parker University one, which was great. Got to see Andy and Dan again, and some of the guys from Rapid were there. Andy and Dan were doing their little seminar there also, and like Dan John got to talk to Kelly Starrett again, which for a while, which was awesome. And yeah, it was really good. It was actually a really good event. And yeah, Angela Duckworth was one of the keynotes there. Gary V, Andrew Huberman, blanking on her name. What's her name? Who does Gabrielle Lyon? And then there was Jay Shetty, one other guy I'm missing. So yeah, like a lot of really
That's a
popular
big event.
keynote speakers.
Yeah, wow, that's a big event. That's big names.
Yeah, yeah, I don't know what they spent on it, but it was a lot. Yeah, my buddy Tommy Wood was presenting there too. Yeah, it was great. It was super fun.
That's awesome. Yeah, let's crack and talk grit because
Cool.
I think she was talking grit about stress and stress adaptation, which I think would be a great well for what you guys do with metabolic and stress adaptation. I think it's a great chat.
Yeah, perfect. And what are you on time, just so I know?
Oh, whatever. I think I had a calendar till 12:30, but yeah, it's like just before quarter to midnight here.
Oh, quarter to midnight.
Yeah,
All right, cool. So if we go for 45 minutes, about an hour, you're good.
yeah, that's fine.
Okay, cool. All right, I'll do a short pause and off we go. And welcome back to the podcast. Ben, how are you doing?
Mate, I'm good. It's nice and late here. I had a nap before actually. Brooklyn made sure that I sat down and have a nap to make sure that I was recharged and ready to go because it's quarter to midnight here. But
Oh man,
these are the time conversions we have to deal with you Yanks.
I know. Well, thank you so much for doing it. I really appreciate it.
No,
All is well in Kangaroo Land.
all is great. It's always very good in kangaroo land.
I had a client years ago who was in Australia, and he sends me an email, and he disappeared for a couple days. I said, "Hey, man," I said, "What was going on?" He's, "Oh, dude, I was so excited. I got my roo shooter license, so I was out roo hunting." I'm like, "What are you talking about? Roo, like kangaroo?" He's, "Yeah, man, it was so cool." I was like, "Oh," and then once I've been to Australia, I'm like, they are like deer in Minnesota. Like you just see them everywhere.
I'm fairly certain we're the only country in the world where a national emblem is also a national pest and you're allowed to kill and eat it.
Yeah.
Kangaroo, if you ever get a chance to try it, because I know it's an import in some countries, you can do it as a game meat. It's a 98.2 when it comes to protein to fat.
Yeah.
So there's a reason they're jacked, and it's because those boys are lean. So it's a good gamey meat and a strong taste, but it is solid in your macro profile.
Yeah, when we were there, we ate a fair amount of it because it was also way cheaper. And I guess it
Yeah.
used to be even cheaper a couple of years before that. And yeah, same thing we found. It was, I liked it, but you had to cook it correctly. And it was definitely uber lean and more on the kind of gamey side, which actually I
Yeah.
like. But if you are
Yeah.
used to standard corn-fed American processed beef, it's quite different.
It's a little different, yeah.
Yeah. So today we wanted to talk about you have a interesting take on grit and how this came up is I was at the Parker University talks in Vegas. Oh man, probably about a month ago now, which was great. Super awesome event. If you ever get the chance to go to one of their events, it was way bigger than I thought. Like the expo hall was amazing. I got to see a lot of people. My buddies, Dr. Andy Galpin and Dan Garner from Rapid Health, which I work with them part time. They were there doing the talk. My good buddy Kelly Starrett was there, Dan John, Dr. Tommy Wood, a bunch of other people I know. And one of the keynote presenters was Dr. Angela Duckworth talking about grit. And you said you had some interesting comments and takes on it. So I said, hey, that's great. Let's get you back on the podcast so we can discuss it.
Yeah, I think one of the things that excites me is when being around more of the masterminders and people like yourself that you can actually have these interesting conversations. Because if I say we're going to, I want to, what was your take on grit, or how, what did you find that she has to say? I know that it's going to be met back with a legitimate intellectual conversation. Like sometimes you get in the industry and you talk with people and it's such surface level things about macros or carbs or body composition or something like that. Yeah, they're things to talk about, but when you get into the performance realm and you get into these rooms of like our mastermind group, it's like there are such high level coaches in there where I know that if I were to send them something philosophical, if I send them something intellectual, if I send them something about even concepts like this, it's gonna be worth having a conversation. And then usually if we're having a conversation about it, chances are that conversation is worth being heard and shared to someone else or re-recorded. So I was just keen to see what you thought at first, and you're like, "Do you want to record it?" And I was like, "Absolutely, let's record it." I was like, "Why not?" But no, I think one of the things that really excited me, I got into Angela Duckworth's work about, I reckon 8 years ago, right before and during my early start to my degree in clinical psych and behavioral science. And interestingly, at first, like she called me very enthusiastically. Like she's very grabby. It's like her concept was great, right? It was like we're talking about this idea of perseverance and consistency of interest. We're talking about how do we get people to be more direct and consistent in their efforts and focus on the future and passionately work towards something. But one of the things that I find we get not confused with, but is worth being conscious of is are we just simply renaming things that already exist? So with Ducksworth's grit, and it's not an attack on grit, I actually like it for what it is. At the fundamental level of what she shares, when you really start diversifying the exposure of different psychological concepts and constructs, she's popularized already existing frameworks and constructs that exist to explain the things she teaches. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it starts to ask bigger questions in psychology, which is, are we studying things that don't need to be studied? Are we looking at things that don't need to be looked at? Or are we simply finding a way to popularize stuff that may expose people to new frameworks? So in my context, like looking at what Ducksworth was actually teaching, there is a multitude or stacked up level of things that that contribute to her construct, if you will, of grit. But it's exciting because it makes people more aware of psychological concepts. That's what gets me excited about it. It's like when I was looking at grit and I looked at how popular Angela Duckworth stuff is, it's not groundbreaking in the sense of she's come up with a new theory of gravity. But it was the way she structured and explained it and popularized her TED Talks and her books and YouTube is it's brought to mainstream almost like a pop psychology of stuff that is already very conceptually deep and pre-existing, and it's like nicely wrapped it into a package that you can sell to someone as like you're gritty, like you have grit, like you're someone who's delayed your gratification, you've persevered towards an outcome, you're consistent in your efforts, and you're passionate about a topic. Like those things indicate that you have grit, and you're like grit has become a lot more popular term than say conscientiousness.
Mm,
But if we look at the research, and even recent research, I believe as far as 2010, 2016, when controlled for conscientiousness, grit doesn't show much greater improvement, or it doesn't show a greater score, if you will, in what they're trying to prove than when it's compared to against conscientiousness in the same studies or the same examinations. So it starts to become a question to me where, is it necessary? But is it necessary because it already exists in another form? Or is it necessary because it's teaching the general population high performance concepts that they can use in everyday life? Like, to me, it's looking at, say, a James Smith. James Smith doesn't say anything revolutionary, doesn't say anything that impressive, but he says it in a very marketable and catchy way where it's, oh, we're teaching stuff to the general population that is a higher order of thinking through a very simplified term. And
And
it's like
which
that
James
to me.
Smith? Because I could name like 4 in fitness right now.
That's true. How would you describe him? The Brit
Or,
with the very tasteful language profile. Basically just
okay.
said F.
Was he the guy who did some stuff with Chris Williamson? Is that the same guy?
Yeah, yeah, it's
Okay,
sense.
all right. So now I got the right guy. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So you look at him and he's really just taken stuff that we know and repackaged it and thrown it out there as very catchy, very marketable versions of that sort of talk, right? He just makes it
Mm-hmm.
very popularized. And that's great because it means that at the general level, people are picking up these concepts. So for me, it was like, I get really excited when people want to talk about this stuff because A, it means you guys being there to see Angela Ducksworth talk about grit and adaptations in stress and stressful environments is fantastic because it means you can unpack that and go, okay, well, what's deeper than that? Because when you really unwrap grit, realistically at a deeper level, there's a lot of individual constructs that go into this, or different frameworks and different theories that go into this that already exist and actually lead to greater performances or have greater impacts at like fundamental levels. So for me, it was like, it's exciting when I see you guys or people like yourself go there, because I know it becomes a more open-ended conversation about like, how did you find grit? How did, considering you guys study stress, how do you find grit in the way she explained it with stress adaptation, or stress in the sense of like it building resilience? Because to me, it starts to become like a deeper conversation that you can expand on and sort of start to enhance the knowledge or awareness of other constructs in psychology that otherwise get bubble wrapped or bow tied into grit.
Yeah, I think my view at a high level, and I'd be curious what do you think of this, is I liked her talk. I like most of her research. This is definitely not my area of expertise. I like what you said about people talking about it and it being more awareness surrounding it. The one area as an outsider in the field that it seems like this could just be an illusion from social media is that my fear is that grit then gets thrown into the area of almost distress training, back to the if you just air quotes try harder, then it'll
Yeah.
solve all your issues. And I'm not saying that's what she's saying per se with the research. I'm saying that's what it appears like the interpretation is, that if you just watch 4 more David Goggins videos on repeat and try harder, like everything in your life will work better. What are your thoughts? Do you think that's an adequate perception of kind of a misconstrued version, or what are your thoughts?
No, I think you're on the money with a key critique of grit is if it's not carefully applied and strategically taught, it does basically just become unintentional or unstrategic suffering and simple grit your teeth, hard work, push through it
Mm,
endorsement. And we know that at some points there are concepts that knowing when to pull back or readjust or redirect actually has a greater improvement on overall development, your skills, whether you're if you're heading down the wrong path, just gritting your teeth through it or just grinding your way through it might not actually be the best reinforcement policy. It might not be the best developmental policy. You might be reinforcing a sense of failure because you just simply can't get through it, or you can't win, or you can't get better. You just made a certain point suck at this thing. At what, like, you need to know that at a certain point there is strategic fallback, and it can be not misconstrued, but it can be perceived if not carefully educated in the market especially when it reaches that Gen Pop audience, because they don't have that critical thinking lens. They just see white coat fallacy. Dr. Ducksworth is absolutely smashing his TED talk, and I'm really hyped up about it. If I grit my teeth, suck it up, and just continue the course, something's bound to happen. We can lead people down a very dangerous path, and not everyone has the same tolerance levels of stress, of deliberate suffering, of exposure, of resilience. And so you can run that risk of heading down these dangerous roads that, if not prepared for, if not developed, can eventually break a person. They can teach rather than correct learned hopelessness, or rather than correct failure. They can almost reinforce them, because that's all the person starts to feel. So it is definitely in my opinion, a fair critique, but it's a fair critique when not intelligently applied. So if grit isn't strategically and intelligently taught, and this is where it starts to come back to, well, what are the fundamental principles of grit and these constructs? Because really, if we're then talking about teaching grit, where we're now going to the fundamentals of what grit is, we're teaching perseverance. Well, that's just delayed gratification with effort. We're teaching task orientation, commitment to a process. Well, that's conscientiousness. We're teaching industriousness and goal orientation. Well, that's conscientiousness as a personality trait. So personality traits, which we know are partly fixed, partly malleable. So we can develop these things over time. And in terms of like stress tolerance load, we're now talking about micro exposure therapies. We're talking about scaffolding. We're talking about the zone of proximal development, making sure that a skill is not so difficult to master that you don't bother, and not so easy that you aren't stimulated. It's got to be in that right middle ground where, with the right environment, with the right stimulus, with the right pressure and stress, you will actually want to do better and put in more effort to get better. So to me, it's a construct of very good psychological concepts, especially in the presence of athletes, highly driven people, high performers, executives. If it starts to reach Gen Pop without the right implementation, it does become risky.
Yeah. How would you teach grit, like the one principles you just outlined? Would you break it down into sub principles, or do you have a better model that you use instead?
So we teach it in almost like deliberate, specific, and strategic suffering with what I call cognitive progressive overload. So in the same way that we look at stretching muscle, training muscle, progressively adding load to the body to try and force adaptation to occur, we can't simply grit our teeth through the heaviest thing possible straight away, right? You're not going to be able to simply, or very few people can go straight to, here is a ultra marathon, right? The amount of people who aren't David Goggins is 99.99999% of the
Yeah.
population. Like, the chances are you aren't David Goggins. So let's remove that ego cap and be logical. We need to systemize and deliberately expose the stress environment to create adaptation over time to get better to load. The same way we do that with the body, we have to do that with the brain. Mental toughness can be taught. Mental toughness is shown in military, in emergency services studies, in high performance work environments, in high performance training environments. Mental toughness can be taught over time. It's a resilience thing. So these things can be taught and exposed, although we do know the trait of mental toughness, again, like most traits, is malleable but also fixed. You have a percentage of that trait that is like inherent, but that doesn't mean that it's not teachable, it's not learnable. You can't get mentally tougher over time. So the important thing to understand with trying to develop a quote unquote grit mindset or a grit life is that you can't go 0 to 100, because what happens then is, if you try too hard too soon, you're going to basically teach yourself that you're going to fail. And if you don't have a strong growth mindset, which again is another thing that can be taught, which makes up grit, that's referring now to Carol Dweck's work. Dr. Carol Dweck, she does a lot of positive psychology around growth mindset versus fixed mindset. We need to look at, okay, well, how do we expose this deliberately, but with a structured level of progression? And it goes back to even looking at CBT, and we start looking at therapeutic practices, looking at exposure therapy. If we're going to structure the idea that we can learn grit, if we just umbrella the term grit and use that as the system, the average person needs to not look at David Goggins and go, I'm going to go run an ultra marathon with a broken ankle. and piss blood and basically shit my pants, pardon my language. But what you need to do is go, what's the next hardest thing that I can do that's within my proximity of ability, but just outside my capabilities, and it forces me to get better. So we want that skill range to be just outside our competence, but within reach enough that it's the carrot and the stick. It's just enough in front of me that I can reach for it. And I'm going to progressively improve to try and get there and be able to get a hold of it. But it can't be so far in my reach, there's not even motivating. If I see $5 down the road, I'm not going to run for $5 okay down the road. If I see $5 2 meters in front of me, oh, it's a free $5 note. I'm going to pick that up. Very different context based on distance and proximity. Same sort of concept, right? If we're looking at exposing and developing a mindset or grit system, we have to be able to expose it gradually over time with degrees of incremental difficulty. And that's for the physiological side as it is the psychological side. You need to show yourself over time that you can get better and better at harder and harder things. And that you need to be able to then remind yourself that, and this is where the growth mindset comes in, it's where the structure comes in as a dynamic adaptive model, is we're looking at, I just lost my absolute train of thought there. We're looking at exposing ourselves to greater complexities, but remind ourselves that we're malleable in our ability to adapt and get better and improve. It means we can develop the skill set over time. We can systemize it. And then when things do seem difficult, which is what we want them to see a little bit more out of reach, it becomes a matter of language and identity. So it's a very psychosomatic, biopsychological model that we have to look at when developing a grit concept, where we're not there yet. I'm going to be there soon. It's not, rather than using like defeative language, we're using driven and open-ended language. We're using reaffirming language that's going to remind us, like, I haven't got my first million yet. I'm not there yet. I haven't won Mr. Olympia yet. The yet, as Dweck would teach in growth mindset orientation development, reinforces that though you don't have it, it's possible and it's coming. That ties into Angela Duckworth's perseverance. And so when you're doing these really hard things, exposing the degrees of difficulty to yourself, cognitively, you are trying to then remind yourself specifically selected self-talk and language, and then defining your identity as someone who over time gets better at things. I'm someone with a growth mindset. I'm someone that gets things done. I'm someone who doesn't quit when it's hard. This leads to a more structured approach to learning grit and trying to develop it as a concept to really make you a better person and enhance your ability to suffer and struggle under stress.
Got it. I'll come back to if there's ways you can teach those concepts more on the physical versus the mental side, but I know that they're all overlapped. So one of the phrases I really like is the brain is in the body and the body is in the brain, or the mind is in the body is in the mind. Like they're so interconnected, it's hard to separate them, but for the sake of doing things and prescribing tasks and things, it's sometimes easier to have things be more physical versus mental. And related to that, my really out there question is, have you seen the goat drill from Cal Dietz? If
No,
you
I haven't seen
haven't,
that
it's
yet.
okay. It the first time he showed me this drill, God, probably 5 years ago, 6 years ago, I watched the video and I'm like, okay, you have lost your freaking mind now. What the hell are you doing? And so for people who haven't seen it, the simple version is you have an athlete, and you've got two cones set up. They're going to run a figure eight around the cones. Cool, that's pretty
Mm-hmm.
easy. But as they're doing this, they're going to keep their head focused only on one specific target. So their head's going to stay the same way, but as you're running the figure eight, then you're going to have to switch. You're going to have to rapidly rotate your head to stay and keep the same target acquired. You may be pulling on the person in one direction. So now, as they're running the figure eight, as they're watching one area, they have an external force that's changing a little bit depending upon their position of where they're at. While they're doing all that, they have a tennis ball they're passing literally around their waist the whole time.
Oh, I have seen this. Yep.
Yeah, so they have a task they're doing with their hands. And then on top of that, they have something called dual tasking. So they're cognitively doing a task at the same time they're doing all this. So they are counting backwards by sevens or counting backwards by three and they're saying that out loud. And that's a simple version. There's an advanced version with 3 hula hoops, somebody chasing you, like shit on the ground, stuff you have to hop over, someone blocking your vision, and it looks insane. And so the first time I saw it, I was like, okay, you've completely lost your mind now. This is the craziest circus trick I've ever seen in my life. And I'm like, so how is it working for you? So, oh my God, this is like the greatest drill I've ever done. This is like so amazing. And I'm like, okay. So the more I thought about it, I was like, oh, so not only do you have to coordinate proprioceptively, not only do you have to
Mhm.
coordinate visual information, vestibular information, now you have a cognitive load on top of that in a sort of semi-controlled environment. So the reason for explaining all that is what I've noticed, and I think Cal would probably agree with this, is doing drills like that seem to not only physically allow you to coordinate better, it
Mhm.
seems like cognitively you function better also. And I was wondering if that is a form of, like you were talking about, cognitive overload because of that dual tasking aspect. So, are there drills, do you think, something like that, which is more a combination of both to increase the sort of the ceiling so you have more like physiologic headroom? And the sub question to that is, are there things that are more on the physical side and things that are more on the mental side that you would use strategically with athletes?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a form of that degree of cognitive progressive overload. If we're looking at, especially because there's progressions of the model or progressions of the exercise as well.
Yep.
When you look at it, you can whether he throws someone in the deep end straight away, and that's just the baseline. But I imagine to get going, athletes generally have a good degree of these sorts of skills, right? They've
Yep.
spent time over years of life, and so enhancing someone who's already a 90%er, and it's like, how do I get that extra 5% out of you? That is exactly that, right? We're looking at a degree of cognitive progressive overload. We're taking the psychological skill or the ability of psychosomatic relationship and enhancing the complexity to a degree that's going to push that athlete. They're now having to do so many things that it's going to force them to either adapt. It's a degree of stress placed on the brain to not only think about, because like realistically, there's neural signals going to the body, there's neural signals trying to understand time and place, there's neural signals paying attention to resistance and being pulled by force. Then there's also the cognitive load of them thinking over time, counting backwards, and then all of that wrapped up in, I've also just got to pay attention to what's going on. And like it's all got to flow at the same time. So if they don't develop this skill, if they don't develop the ability to organize chaos like this, at a certain point, they're going to break in the game or they're going to break in their sport, right? That the logic of that to me, psychologically, is that you are teaching them to handle chaos and function and order that in execution. And it's, yes, like proprioception and awareness of space and time and things
Yeah.
like that as well. But if all of that is happening all at once, at first it's going to feel like chaos and it's going to feel like stress and panic. It's going to feel crazy. But at a certain point in time, they continue to do it. They understand the reasoning behind it. They are passionate about their sport. They're excited by the exposure and the interest in the development. Eventually, that starts to become easier. And you've now increased what you might call their cognitive threshold or their cognitive ceiling. And they can now operate more tasks, like I call like cognitive task stacking. They can now operate, in my opinion, based on that very exercise, they can now operate more strategically with more capability psychologically before you might say they would cognitively break or snap. And you put that into a game environment, especially something like an NFL or a gridiron, American football, NHL, things where there's so many different plays of direction, multiple angles, multiple speeds. Yes, the ball's gone in one direction, but you're paying attention to what plays are here, reading the play, reading the flow of the field. All these things happening at one time, coaches yelling out a play from the sideline or in your mic, in your head, whatever's going on, refs making a decision. All of these things then able to handle to a degree better before your psychological bandwidth snaps. So absolutely in my eyes, like that is a degree of it's cognitively structuring chaos so that you can handle that chaos in the real life scenario. So that to me would be like it's a huge application of that process to enhance the athlete's performance, not in the sense of the drill itself is insane, but cognitively it's going to enhance their performance. they will then be able to function more effectively before so many things get in the way. Or it might be 6 actions or 6 psychological processes used to cause the over arousal and decrease performance. Now they might be able to handle 8 or 9, if we just call them units of cognitive load. They can now potentially handle 8 or 9, which allows them to be that next step ahead or that next level of as an athlete. And yeah, psychologically versus physiologically, there are definitely exercises I think that I try and expose them to. For me, it's especially in lifestyle factors, in training factors, environment factors, getting them to do things that are just a little degree harder than what they're currently doing. So obviously training progressive overload is easy, but having people do things like difficult like confrontations, things that might challenge them as a person, getting them to push themselves in a fear-based environment. What is something that scares them? Well, let's gradually expose you to that fear, to that worry, that concern. For my prep athletes, it's trying to get their life structured and organized by a calendar, getting them to meet deadlines, having them get greater and greater proficiency at their life over periods of time. What that eventually does is reinforce, let's say, skill stacking, right? For the average physique athlete, it's not about so much the training acumen, the training skill, but it's more so, can you get your meal prep done? Can you wake up at a certain time? Is your alarm clock off? Did you get your steps in, your bike in? How do I teach you to handle the load of a prep before we get there? Because if you go from never training, dieting, or being lean before to starting a contest prep, the very likelihood is that your life implodes and it's going to collapse. So how do we get you from 0 to +1, then +1 to +2, then 0 to 3, then 3 to 4? And not in the sense of more exercise or more training, but the ability to tolerate and juggle the chaos of a prep life. And also, because on top of that, you have to realize how many people also aren't paid to compete. They're just simply prep athletes that do it as a hobby and they got a full-time job. So you need to be able to develop and expose yourself to these things, structure these things. And a strategy I'll do is I have them write 2 lists. And this goes back to my stoic beliefs and how I employ stoicism in my coaching. And what I'll do is have them create 2 lists. One immediately they have direct control over, anything in their entire day that they have to get done that is something that they are in control of, they're responsible for. Not everyday occurrences, stuff that has to get done no matter what. It's going to happen or your job requires it. That's your job. But stuff that is in your control, training, posing, cardio, steps, time with your relationship with your partner, your wife, husband, girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever, time with your dog, your kids, whatever you got, your social interactions, maintaining your finances, those sort of things. That's in your control. That's you. Then the list of things that we can't control. That a list immediately to reduce cognitive bandwidth and waste of energy. Let's just get rid of that list. The list that you can't control, but yeah, there are things that impact your life, but if you can't control them, what's the point? So let's get rid of that. Now what I want you to do is, how many things in your day can you get done in an order of priority, like most important things first? How many things can you get done based on your current ability, your current skill set, before you go, shit, this is a big day, I can't handle it, it's too stressful? So what we find is when we don't develop this cognitive progressive overload, this cognitive ceiling, people will see, if they see a list and it's too big, they are more demotivated than they are if you just remove the list and let them go at it by themselves and figure it out. So we go, okay, let's cut this list down, find the number for you where it's operable. It might take you a couple of weeks, but you find what's operable. I can do 5 things in my day before life just seems chaotic. Fantastic. Let's figure out how we can stack your calendar and load your day and load your time, make it more effective and productive. It might be learning to habit stack. It might be understanding, operationalizing routine systems and behavioral conditioning. Any psychological skill set there around like just structuring time more effectively, time blocking, whatever that might be. Can you handle 2 more if we do that? Yes. Okay. What about 8? Yes. Fantastic. What about 9? 9's pushing it. Okay. What I like to do there then is hold the line of that 9th item. And then one of the mistakes we were talking about before with grit is like we just push people through, right? If we don't prepare this properly, we just drive them forward down this path. There's landmines, there's barricades, there's things in the way, there's explosions, stuff blows up. Your life just gets chaotic. What I like to do in that scenario is, if someone has that 9th thing and that's where we're juggling, we'll reinforce the foundations and structure that, solidify that position, reinforce that position as much as we can, and then allow that to become the new baseline, and then operate again further from there, and now find the 10th or the 11th. But what I find is when we do this is over time, those initial first 3, 4, 5 things that used to be really difficult, with this grit, practice with purpose, implementation, excitement and interest to the goal, these things become non-negotiables and aren't even concerns anymore. So what used to be 9 or 10 things in my day that would break me, I've now created the emotional bandwidth or the psychological bandwidth that we can add new things, because this stuff now is just, it's got to get done no matter what. It's not even on the list anymore. It's just non-negotiable. So that concept over time starts to teach them to handle greater degrees of difficulty through deliberate exposure of stress by stacking the struggles, right? I would call it strategic struggling. I'm like deliberately trying to get you to struggle on purpose under load to force stress adaptation and force stress management. And then that way we start to get more difficult tasks. And one of the things that I do with my check-ins with my clients is I ask them, what's the win this week? What's something that you overcame versus what's an action you want to work on for next week? If I go back to, say, I've got a client I've worked with for 12 months, whether it's physique, performance, whatever it might be, what you tend to find is the things that they said were struggles they faced at the start are just everyday occurrences that they execute, not even mention. It's not even a struggle 12 months down the track. That's just stuff they get done because it's a Tuesday and that's what they call waking up. But back then when we started, getting them up on time to do some steps, have a coffee and make their meals for the day was this overwhelming level of stress exposure that is that paired with their work life, paired with their relationship, paired with trying to go to the gym, it's not gritting through that. They were collapsing. So this deliberate structured exposure and stoic principles and cognitive development and deliberate strategic suffering leads to the ability to develop a higher ability to tolerate load, and we can add more intense things on top of that. So it's like increasing the complexity of a movement pattern to a client and increasing the weight of that movement. That's where it starts to kind of stack up. And eventually you look back 12 months, 2 years, 5 years, you're like, not only did I get those things done, they're basically non-issues anymore for me. And on top of that, I'm now adding greater degrees of difficulty that I didn't even think I even wanted to work on. 5 years down the track, what else can I do? And so now we're reinforcing this growth mindset with that sort of application as well.
Awesome. And related within that, that's probably a side topic, but I do think it's related. My bias, which I got this from my buddy Frankie, is that I don't think we have to force adaptation. I think adaptation will happen given the correct circumstances. I do think other things can change the degree of which we get from that adaptation. So I always think back to the classic lifting mice studies. So they had the overweight model, which was a lot of times a tail limb suspension. So they put the little mouse, they have its tail up in the thing, so it's walking around all day on its front paws. They had a squatting mouse study where they had a little harness for the guy, and they would shock him, and he would squat up and down on this little lever machine, which is crazy to see. iCook probably wouldn't approve that study now. But what they found with these studies is that if they had enough overload, and granted, this is a high amount of overload in a controlled environment, then they could do all sorts of mean, cruel things to them. They could castrate them, they could put them on low protein diets, and the front paws, because they had so much overload, would still get bigger and stronger. Now, again, would they get bigger and stronger to the same degree if they had more protein or other things? No. But even in the worst possible scenario, they couldn't drive the adaptation to absolute zero. So I always think with clients that we're, like you said, stacking all these things in a nice progressive manner so that they can get the most adaptation from it versus back to the distress model of forcing adaptation on someone. Like, oh, you may not want to lift this week, but we're going to increase your volume by 30% or something like that. And the hard part with this is that there's a time and a place for distress training. I'm not saying never do it, but it always feels to me like when people say overload or adaptation that their brain tends to go more to this forcing load and forcing things and trying harder on it. What are your thoughts on that, and how does that, because I think that relates more to the model you're talking about of just slowly, progressively adding these things. We're not going to go from like volume loading. We're not going to go from a nice progression one week to the next to be like, ooh, this is an intense week, so we're going to up your volume by 100%, right?
Yeah, and let's look at what happens if we grab a random person that's barely trained before and we put 150, 200% load on their back squat and they've never trained.
You get
Yeah,
one good eccentric rep.
literally you're going to get one good rep and it's not even going to be concentric because they probably won't come back up. But even with that, if they did manage to come back up, right? Like to me, the reward of that exposure does not outweigh the risk profile of what comes from that attempt.
Yep.
And if we classify that as a stress, a unit of stress, then the risk of that stress exposure is, to me, it's not strategic. It's almost irrational. And if we're trying to look at strategically forcing adaptation, or sorry, we're trying to strategically apply adaptation to occur, create an environment in which adaptation is positive and beneficial and productive towards growth, then creating a threat-based environment like that where it's neurologically going to overload the client, they're nervous, they're scared, they've already, to me, that starts to inverse the U hypothesis. The arousal level becomes defeating, not productive. We're going to see a lot more risk to that outcome than if we simply gradually expose the client over time or the person over time. And this concept isn't just limited to a Gen Pop person who's just starting out. It'll apply to the highest level of person that operates. And it's just about managing that load and exposing them over time. Because even elite tier operators, at least even advanced SAS operatives, SEAL operatives, they still need degrees of stimulus to progressively overload and get better. They still need their training environments have to be a certain way. They progress their training when they go through from buds to real life training profiles or real life environments. The threat stress exposure increases because they go from a structured, controlled environment to chaos in a real world scenario. That then creates a new level of stress for them to adapt to. But they didn't just go straight there. They didn't just go from 0 to 100. The same way when we take our clients, and I'm a big believer in a big philosophy of mine is trying to teach high performance level principles to the average person. I don't need them to be Michael Jordan, but I genuinely believe most people can improve their life by taking some things from high performance athletes or high performance individuals. More people need structure. More people need executive decision making. More people need conscientiousness, goals, and they need to be able to, yes, to a degree, to umbrella it, they need grit. They need to be able to get through life stress. Life is chaos. Life is chaotic. So yeah, I definitely think in regards to that distress model, if I just take a new client's work and said, hey, in the next 2 years, I want to get on stage and be a high level bodybuilder, and I just go, cool, here's a gram of trend, here's a gram of test. We're going to do 150 sets a week, train 6 days a week. You're not allowed to see your friends on the weekend. You're not allowed to do these things. They will maybe last a week before their bloods are shot, their body's shot, they're beaten up, they're overstimulated, their injury risk profile is through the roof. But then what happens is psychologically, and this is where it combines, like you said, the body doesn't exceed the brain doesn't exceed the body. The psychosomatic relationship is almost inseparable. We're going to reinforce them that they can't do something.
Yeah.
And if we look at the
You got
motivational
to call it failure.
exactly, literally, right? And if we look at the motivational theories, if we can't reinforce competence, we don't help them to develop a sense of relation to us, and they don't have autonomy in decision making, they are going to be almost completely unmotivated by the goal that they're trying to achieve. And then on top of that, we pair the idea that they can't do it because we've set up this environment for pure failure. They simply cannot do it. The average person is not yet adapted to that level of stress and volume and output and intensity. Doesn't mean they can't get there, but right, the likelihood is that right now they can't. So by doing that, all you've done is reinforce the negative self-beliefs that they already have of themselves, the negative language that they use, the negative identity. They've come to you to try and build this profile out, and you just gone, hey, screw you. I'm going to throw you in the deepest end possible. And you've barely touched a football in your life, or you've barely thrown a ball around, or you've barely done structured sport. I'm going to throw you the deepest level of intensity that I can find under the greatest load possible and expose you to none of it beforehand and then blame you when it goes wrong and say you didn't want it bad enough. Like that isn't coaching. That's defeating your client before they start. That distress model in that regard breaks them before it builds them. And yes, when we look at muscle, when people talk about, break down the tissue first and then rebuild it, repair it over time, blah, blah. But in this context, you are psychologically breaking the client alongside the physiology. And the likelihood is that client doesn't come back from that. That athlete doesn't come back from that. So, yeah, is there a time and place to throw them in the deep end? For sure. It might be like, I just simply want to see if you have grit or mental toughness. I want to see if you have resilience. There are certain environments where it's more constructed to see if the person will break and throw in the towel, or if they'll just simply give me their best effort and go until they literally can't go anymore. That's a test, sure, but I'm not going to do that for every training session and go, why didn't you want it bad enough? So to me, yeah, absolutely agree that distress in that regard, as that model of training or exposure becomes detrimental and negative to the long-term goal. And if we're planning to work with these people long term, or if these people are trying to change their lives for the better over a 5, 10, 20-year period, going about it this way in the first month is completely irrational and defies the logic of periodization and progressive overload of cognitive and physiological hypertrophy. So yeah, I think if we look at the long term, right, like a lot of people overestimate what they can do in a year, underestimate what they can do in a decade. If we extend the time horizon for most of these people and have them understand, like, this is a long-term game, whether it be high performance, you want to be an elite operator, an elite businessman, an executive CEO, you want to be a bodybuilder, a track athlete, a field sport athlete. At a certain point, these are long-term games that will take time to build up to. It's more productive and it will be a greater degree of development for them if you build those skills up. Like those athletes, before they get to the GOAT exercise, I guarantee that most of them have some high degree of athletic development over time, whether it be going from high school to collegiate, or they're at a D1 school, or they've come from a very successful high school program. So they have the fundamental pillars to handle that much cognitive operation, right? If you just took a 7-year-old and was like, hey, figure this out, they're probably going to overload and overwhelm themselves to go, shit, what am I doing? All these things are happening all at once, because they haven't developed that mental proclivity to doing these things yet. That doesn't mean it won't ever happen. But if we look at that 7-year-old and go, hey, you haven't done it yet, you're a failure. We're really not setting up an environment for them to become a high tier operator in the future.
Yeah. So a couple of my thoughts on that is, I think as we learn more and more about the science of even adaptation, I don't think we even have to, on a physiological level, air quotes, break as many things, right? I feel like I have a Limp Bizkit song running through my head now. We look at muscle, right? You used to think, oh my God, like you have to tear down all the muscle tissue and build it back up. And yes, of course, that does happen to some degree, but most of the data now says muscle itself can sense the amount of stress that's being applied to it. You don't have to tear all the fibers per se. If you look back at the Hans Seile's gas law, it was mostly based off of toxicology that, oh yeah, if the cells are exposed to this toxic thing, then, this is your adaptation from it. The newer data would say more along the lines of Kelvin Davies stuff, which is adaptive homeostasis, which just simply says you don't need to break anything or you don't need to cause damage before the body will respond. It can sense these different changes in pH and stress, and you don't have to necessarily cause damage, and you can still get high levels of adaptation, like cardiac preconditioning, low levels of oxygen to cardiac tissue via aerobic training, positive adaptations later. You don't need to absolutely cut off oxygen to certain parts of the tissue. That ends up in a lot of damage, which is really bad. Which brings it all the way back to the eustress versus the distress model. I think with eustress, EU stress, stress that's applied to the system, you can generally adapt to in a shorter fashion. You can, I think, get a long ways on that model. And I agree, there are definitely times where you're going to need to do some distress training, and honestly, I may do that with certain athletes just to see, like you said, how do they respond? And that gives me an idea of what I should work on.
Yeah, I agree. I think, yeah, it's especially on the psychological side, the risk of breaking is it's a lot more concerning than I think people give gravity to or give weight to. And when we look at these athletes, individuals, general populations, the psychological exposure that comes from doing something like that, that style of stress exposure that is quite intense, abrupt, and instant, like very, especially for first timers, it risks very long-term damage, and it creates some risk profiles that just aren't simply worth the squeeze when you can structure a better approach that helps them build over time. Now, if I'm talking about building high operators for the rest of their life, why does it matter if I have them do this utmost extremity now in the first month of us working together? What does that prove other than I've just thrown them in the deep end, but also in the deep end is a toaster and it's connected to a power outlet and I turn the power on and it's going to fry their brain. Like it's a no-win situation that I've somehow constructed to look as mental toughness or resilience or grit, whatever umbrella term or psychological construct you want to throw under it to define it. When, to me, I would much rather just have a slower, gradual rate of progression that is productive, strategic, and achieving a specific outcome that I know that, and the other part is that it's reinforcing positivity, it's reinforcing that growth mindset. So the risk we play is if we reinforce a fixed mindset to someone who hasn't quite developed a growth mindset yet, that locks in more of that lone hopelessness and failure perspective, and they give up. We have what's called ego versus mastery goal orientation. Someone who is mastery driven has the ability or the traits and awareness to understand that developing goals over time, developing skills over time, or achieving something over time is a matter of when, not if, but it's because they put in the work, they develop it, they work on it. People that have an ego-driven goal will tend to drop off if the goal isn't in line with what they're good at. They won't push themselves beyond that. And we see that a lot in high school athletes, right? They go to a certain caliber, and because they've been reinforced and their ego's been fluffed up and there's their hype crew around them is you're the best, you're the best, you're the best. They go to that, say, next level. They go from high quality, a high school program to D1, and they can't quite cut it. And then it's all of a sudden it's the coach's fault. Let's throw them out. They basically just throw in the towel, and for a lack of a better term. A lot of that is less to do with their physiology and a lot more to do with their psychology, because they haven't quote unquote developed this grit. But really, the reality is like their ego goals have prevented them. They've developed a fixed mindset around what they're good at. They don't want to try a different position. They don't want to try a different play on the field. They don't want to try this different route to run because this is what's worked for them. This is what got them hyped up. This is what got them reinforced. And if you aren't working on this, developing this over time, that fixed mindset, especially as soon as things start to go wrong or get chaotic or get a little bit more stressful, which there is a big jump in quality and speed and skill going from high school to D1, you are very quickly going to reinforce a fixed mindset and they quit. And it might have only took, rather than looking at it as a skill or performance issue or lapse, the reality is we should have been working on them, developing this mental resilience, these mental skills, this cognitive overload, as well as developing this growth mindset towards what they're trying to achieve. But again, going back to kind of like that Eustress model, we need to be looking at this over time, progressing this, getting it better. If you just simply take a kid and go, hey, you're a freshman in high school, you're going to go play NFL, chances are that kid gets absolutely pumped and never plays football again, right? That's the equivalent of what we're talking about when you look at it in a performance field sport. The progression model is Pee Wee football or Little League, whatever you guys call it over there. High school, you make high school, you get your offer and you get drafted to or picked to whoever you declare to. You get to the whatever division university program or college program you get into. Generally from there, if you go to the next level, you win a decent state title or national title, you're in a very high tier program, you make it to the NFL, you've developed over time an exposure to not only the physical skill or the physical demands, but also the psychological pressures and needs and skills that come with that. It's a lot different going from playing in front of your local friends and family to a high school Friday night lights, 5,000 fans, middle of the night, and it's everyone's going crazy, the whole town shut down. Then it's you're playing at Ohio State and there's 100,000 people, and then you're at the NFL and you're trying to play for a Super Bowl. The adaptation over time with degrees of exposure, with hardship and deliberate strategic development, is going to reinforce that stress adaptation, the ability to tolerate that load before you crumble. And so now it's just like another day in the park. But the reality is, if you look back to where you started in the park, now you're playing in the NFL at a Superdome, and a million people are watching you play every week. That is the real life progression of how that works if you structure it properly. But if you don't, and you just take that Pee Wee kid and go, hey, go play D1, he absolutely gets pummeled and breaks basically every bone in his body and will probably never play the sport again. And we've just completely disenfranchised this individual from developing not only as an athlete, but as a person, because of the skills and abilities we know that comes with that cognitive development. They transfer from their sport. It's not just in sport we apply them. It's business, life, friendships, relationships, education, study. So to me, it's critical that it's taught properly, but in the strategic and correct manner, it can be very fruitful. But if it's rushed and that process is ignored, and you do end up on that sort of misunderstood grit route, it can be very detrimental, if not ruining, of what potential development that person might have had.
Yeah, I always think of people, I think, underestimate the psychological, mental side. I remember years ago when Pablo was still doing the RKC, I signed up, did the RKC. This is, was this probably 2007, maybe something like that, a long time ago. And at the time, it was a 3-day thing. You had to pass the kettlebell snatch test on the first day, and it was pretty grueling. Like, you didn't really know what was going to happen. They'd have you do 3 to 4 hard workouts a day and do some skill instruction and stuff. And from the physical side, it was pretty demanding. But the craziest part was, I think it was like day 2. It was taught at this high school gym, so we'd have access to the gym and outside. And Pablo comes in, he's like, all right, so I think we're gonna have you do the hardest workout you've ever done next. I'll come get you when we're ready. And just walks out of the gym. So there's no instructors in there, there's no one in there. Doesn't give us a time frame. This is all done on purpose, of course. And so the kid next to me is just freaking out. He's just losing his shit. He's, oh my God, what are they gonna have us do? This is gonna be horrible. This is gonna be so bad. I'm like, we don't know what it is. He's like, oh, when's he coming back? He's just leaving us sit here. I'm like, yeah, I'm sure he's doing this on purpose.
Yeah,
He's
it's
probably out back
absolutely.
talking with his buddies, going, leave him cooking there long enough. And he's, well, aren't you nervous? I'm like, yeah, but I don't know. I don't control what's going to happen next. Yeah, it's probably going to suck. Like, all of it sucks so far. What do you expect? Like, you signed up for this thing. Like, you
Yeah.
voluntarily pay this guy a lot of money to do this. But it was interesting just to see how many people who, in theory, this is a rest time. This is a time you're not doing anything, which was pretty rare over those 3 days. And just to see how many people could not really deal very well with the uncertainty of something they signed up for, knowing that they willingly put themselves in this position. And physically, they might have been relatively prepared, but psychologically, they were just like out of it entirely.
Yeah, it's to me, it's always interesting to see, I think, how little value people put in psychological development and mental
Hmm.
skills training. And just as simple as like you said, emotional regulation.
Yeah.
What you're talking about there is going back to even very simple Stoic philosophical principles. Is this inside my control? Can I control this? Am I in charge of what's about to happen? No.
No,
What do I
not
have?
at all.
What do I have control over? My effort and my emotional regulation. Do I put energy into what he's about to give us that I can't, like right now? It's Schrodinger's workout. The workout's nothing. The workout doesn't exist, and the workout's going to be the worst thing in the world all at the same time until he tells you. You
Hmm.
can't do anything about that until he tells you, and then you can regulate yourself accordingly and stimulate yourself as you need to. And it's going to be hard, obviously. Whatever training it is, it's like the idea is training's probably going to be hard. So yeah, that's the case. But like you said, you've come into this deliberately exposing yourself to this environment with the intention of hard training and development and exposure, and you're then freaking out about the said thing that you've signed up for. So something along the line, along the way, people aren't deliberately exposing themselves to enough of these things. Where when you do sign up for it or you do expose yourself, it's overwhelming. And that's why we do, if you look at grit as a concept, what we talked about before, how to structure the correct application, micro exposures aren't just, I'll go do hard things for hard things' sake. What you find is when you do a hard thing, is it reinforces self-confidence. It reinforces the ability to psychologically adapt to that stress, not just physiologically. For next time, I'm not going to be as stressed because I've done it before. It might not be the same thing, but one of the things I teach my athletes is preps get substantially easier the more you do them. It doesn't mean go do them all the time and do a prep every 6 months, but the next time you prep, you'll get a little bit leaner. You'll mentally handle a little bit more workload. You'll probably have a bit more size. You'll be able to eat a little bit more food, and you'll probably be able to handle me digging you a little bit deeper. So every time you do the hard thing, it's not just that you've got grittiness to get through it. It's that when you've proven that you've been able to do something that is difficult, that is hard, that is exhausting, it then reinforces in your brain in the future that you're able to handle this. It's threat development. Your threat development's the wrong word. It's
Almost like threat inoculation.
it is. It's threat inoculation. You're preparing yourself further for future threats that you don't know about yet. And by doing that, it's prepare for the worst, hope for the best, prepare for the worst. By doing this, you know that you have some degree of competence in difficult situations. So you're going to be more controlled. If you're more controlled, you're more emotionally regulated. If you're more emotionally regulated, you have greater control over optimal arousal. If you have greater control of arousal, neurologically, you're going to perform better. So the psychological concept of it is not just going to do hard things and prove you're the fittest person in the world or you can handle X amount of load. It's that it's also reinforcing hardship in your brain that you can handle it. And I think it's prevalent in society now, even amongst athletes and just general populations. People aren't competent at handling difficult situations as much as they used to be. Things we've been in a very, especially in Western cultures, a very prolonged period of safety and security and ease, comfort, availability, where it's reduced the need to be forcefully exposed. And so people aren't going out and seeking that exposure. To me, for true cognitive development of grit, development of mental toughness, mental resilience, mental fortitude, long-term delayed gratification, you need to be exposing yourself to harder degrees of things with delayed deadlines and timeframes so that you can adequately develop the mental skills to handle not just your sport, but life. Life progressively gets more difficult. It gets tougher. If you don't have that background of, and we'll use grit, I have no qualms with using grit as a construct. If you don't have the backing of some form of grit in your life, when that thing in life hits you, it's going to be so much worse than if you prepare for it, if you develop it. And that can be found in any sort of physiological endeavor, whether it be a combat sport, a martial art, whether it be training for different things, high rocks, CrossFit, whatever you want to call it there, F45, resistance training, putting yourself under greater degrees of load, physiologically taxing yourself, proving you can handle it, coming back and doing it again. You're reinforcing cognitively that you can handle more stuff and greater degrees of difficulty of that stuff. And it's one of the reasons why I use comp preps to teach so many lessons. Because to me, I've played high degrees of sport, played varieties of sports, run businesses, multiple businesses. There's been nothing more life difficult than prepping at the same time as operating your life. There is nothing that I've found as all encompassing as an endeavor as bodybuilding requires. So for me, it's the greatest proxy of this concept that I can utilize. And it pushes me to my utmost extreme every single time I do it. And I can usually get a bit more extreme with it. I get a little bit leaner. I can handle a little bit hungrier. I can push a little bit more load. Physiologically, I don't break under the same amount. And I psychologically handle that next thing. So to me, that's what makes bodybuilding so rewarding outside of whatever medal I get or place I get on stage, because it literally embodies this very thing that I talk about.
Oh, I love that. Last question as we wrap up. So one of the things I started doing in 2020 was I'm like, okay, so if I want to train myself and I want to err or move the needle more towards the mental side, is there something that's very hard to do that I could do every day, but doesn't have a high physical cost associated with it, and in theory would not require a lot of time? Yeah, you could maybe do some horrible Wingate repeats or things like that, but if you even take a 60-second Wingate and you go like literally to an RPE of a 10, there's a much higher physical cost associated with that than I think most people realize, assuming you've been training for a little period of time. And what I ended up coming up with is, oh, cold water immersion. It
I
sucks
was going to
every
say,
time I
I
do
know what
it.
your answer was going. Yeah.
I physiologically, maybe I'm a little bit better, probably not any worse. Doesn't take a lot of time. Granted, so I converted a freezer, did all this stuff. And when COVID happened, I was doing it probably 6 or 7 times a week for almost like 2.5 years. Wasn't really traveling, was at home. And my thought process that I talked about on the podcast was if I'm doing this stressful thing and I'm repeating it, it should be very easy over time. And what I
Hmm.
noticed was it definitely got easier. I could withstand colder temperatures, longer duration without shivering, lower RPE. But the super interesting part was, even to this day, right before I get in, there is still a huge amount of hesitation of your body going, hey, dumbass, what are you doing? This is stupid. Don't you know this is dumb? Like, you shouldn't be doing this. This is the worst thing you've ever decided to do. And I would have thought that sort of resistance or limbic friction, if you use Andrew Huberman's term, would have gone away. But the interesting part was it didn't. And I've talked to other people who've done a lot more cold water immersion than I have. But I think that's a positive because each day you have to then overcome that thing,
Hmm.
be like, nope, I'm going to do this. This is going to be great. And you feel better afterwards, even though during it, just still the first 20, 30 seconds always just sucks. What are your thoughts on that? And do you have any other things along that area? If someone wants to skew the dial more to the mental side, what are things you would have them do?
Yeah, I think the interesting note that I would have, that I guess query I would have for that is the fear response that you have. Do you notice a decrease, or probably you probably have, but the answer would be from day one to year 2.5 later, 5 years later now, have you noticed a decrease in the decisional action to move from thought, fear response to entering the cold water? That to me would be a big indicator of the mental resilience, the fortitude, the belief, and confidence. You've overcome that fear response, which is, hey, don't do it, which is the inhibitory response. You've bypassed that now by sheer exposure and deliberate hard work. You've shortened the distance between the fear kicking in and you making the decision to do it anyway, which, if we look at it, a lot of the time, people are scared of making hard decisions. They let the fear or impulse response tell them not to, and they listen to it, they validate it, and they avoid the hard thing based on a perceived threat response or a perceived fear. My guess would be, without you answering yet, is that you've probably decreased the time between first thought of fear, hey, this is dumb, to getting in the actual water.
I would say overall, yes. But the other interesting part is it seems to be very short, and the adaptation is extremely asymmetric, meaning that so now I've been in South Padre for a while. We'll be back home in a bit. I know the first day I go to do it, I am gonna hesitate and pussyfoot around a lot longer than normal. Even though I've only been gone 6 weeks, there's this weird thing where it seems like that 1 to 2 week mark. And I've talked to other experts on this, and I don't know if it's so much the physiologic adaptations change that fast, but on the psychological side, it seems if I just stop doing it for 2 weeks, they want to go back. I know I will do it, but I know I spend more time hesitating. It seems like the skill set I think is beneficial long term, but it
Mm-hmm.
also seems to, I don't want to say disappear, but change very fast. Where I think of adding muscle mass, like adding lean body mass or muscle mass takes quite a while. However,
Mm-hmm.
unless you're completely catabolic or your stress is off the charts, you can retain a fair amount of that by doing
Yeah.
very minimal work for quite some time. It takes longer to accrue, it's longer for it to disappear on the other side. The cold water seems to have this weird asymmetric thing where it takes quite a while to get up to the top, but the second you remove that stimulus or even reduce it, it seems to go back to a baseline really fast. But I think that's more on the psychological side than
Yeah.
the physiology. And part of that may have to do with that it's a limbic hardwired thing where, yeah, if you're exposed to cold water too long, you are dead. Like there is, right, this is in a controlled environment. You've got a huge therapeutic window. As long as you're not some numbnuts, you're probably going to be fine. But I think there is, based on a very real physiologic thing, that your body is trying very hard to protect you from.
Yeah, and I think the real world application for that is you can find a lot of areas in life where one of the things, so I wrote an ebook called Ancient Systems in a Modern World, and it was about the concept of the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system,
Hmm.
the autonomic nervous system, and its responses in life from where we first developed it to where we are now, the implication that the stress system has on the body, and the way anxiety's played such a role in the last sort of 50 years. If we really look at it, what used to be a system to help us detect threat responses and our physiological response to that threat has now become my boss yelled at me, so therefore I'm having an anxiety and a panic attack, and my heart rate's 150 beats a minute, and I'm basically going to go cardiac arrest. If we looked at that, really, it's because you haven't developed or you don't have a very strong ability to handle stress and load that would prevent that from occurring. And the thing that I find was interesting about things like ice plunges and cold water plunges and immersion is it because you've recognized that fear, confrontational conversations, hard conversations, deliberate exposure to confronting environments, that is also a fear response for a lot of people. Isolating that fear adaptations they have and going, well, exposing something like ice cold water, that's also a fear response. What we're seeing is a very similar physiological response. It's just the context and environment is different. If I can train you to do this thing, and that is expose yourself to ice cold water when your brain's telling you this is dangerous, don't do it, chances are we can cross translate this to the field of your workplace, your relationship, your friendships, your business, your training, and say, hey, boss, this was not my fault. Here's the evidence. I did these things. I take accountability of my workload, but this wasn't on me. It was on you. Or I'm not going to let you speak to me like that. Or these are the boundaries in my relationship. The ability to do the hard thing here translates to the hard things that you're ignoring elsewhere in the rest of your life. And that's what I find is so useful in developing mental resilience, developing mental toughness in these exposures, deliberate exposure that you're doing here, to me, would have those implications elsewhere in the rest of your life. That's what I like about the cross translation. I try to teach this to my athletes is that these developments, these exposures, and these stress responses are beneficial outside of your sport. They're beneficial outside of the single plane environment that you operate in. You'll notice that you start to do things, harder things in other areas of your life. You'll notice that if you regulate emotions, regulate impulse control, like confront fears or do something that's fear inducing, you'll be more confident to do that somewhere else for a productive, beneficial reason. So to me, that would make a wonderful sense that it's probably never not going to be fearful, but you are able to confront that fear and still do the thing anyway. And even with time off, it's still able to be returned. It's completely absent. You're still able to, I guess, if we compared it to a training stimulus, muscle memory and satellite cells are quite beneficial and they do develop over time. We know that even if you did take time off, to get back to where you were is probably going to be a shortened distance comparatively than if you never started. So if we were to really conceptualize it, that's probably what's happening when you come back from like that
Sure.
6 weeks off. It's going to suck. There's the first week from no training, DOMS. Everything has DOMS. Every muscle group you train, every explosive power, every fiber type, everything's DOMS. But you think they're like, oh, I've trained for 10 years. Why am I getting DOMS after only taking 4 weeks off? But the reality is it's just getting back to that stimulus, getting back to that exposure. It's going to be hard still, but it's going to get better it's going to adapt quicker back to that preconditioned baseline. I guess would probably be the fairest example to that. That would make the most sense to me. And yes, even if you apply that in the rest of your life, where you're looking at those gritty things, those hardship things that you're avoiding by developing that ability, by confronting that fear, I'm almost certain that crosses over to places where I'm no longer as, well, fear, if we look at it as an arousal response, as a physiological response to excitation, is your heart rate's going to be more regulated, so you're less fearful. You're not going to be less reactive and emotional and excited. So you're going to be more control of emotional regulation, which then keeps you in more control of the situation. So to me, it's like that directly translates over because you have better regulation of the overall system. you can handle tougher things, which to me, it aligns perfectly with the idea of developing a physiological grit that would then lead to the development of psychological grit.
Yeah, and that's my bias for the physiologic flexibility cert is what once you're like a B student in exercise, nutrition, and sleep, like what are the things, what are the areas you would target to increase resilience? My bias there is temperature, right? So you've got cold and hot, pH, low pH, high pH, expanded fuels, lactate and ketones, and then breathing, O2 and CO2. And all those obviously overlap with each other. But if you can train those systems specifically, not necessarily to move your body temperature off 98.6, but to increase that what I call HDR, human dynamic range, or just that physiologic headroom, that when
Mm-hmm.
you encounter those things outside of that training stimulus, like your capacity is actually enhanced.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, it will physically be easier. And like you were saying with transfer, I think there's a lot of what they call cross-adaptation between those areas. Like one really
Mm-hmm.
cool study they did was they exposed people to a hypoxic, I'm sorry, they gave people cold water immersion, one group they didn't, and they exposed both groups then to a hypoxic environment, so low oxygen, which is very threatening. The group that had the cold water immersion before reported that same hypoxic condition as not as threatening. So there's some weird cross
Interesting.
adaptations, I think, between those systems where they all kind of overlap on each other too, which I think is pretty fascinating.
Yeah, I think I go back to like your sub question, I guess, to give an answer to something that I would have clients do is it's very individualized, but I try to find the thing that a client is scared of, and I will try and have them do something like that at least once a week in a
Mm,
micro dose environment. So one of my clients, he's a young lad, but very started off very insecure, very shy, very timid, and had complete fears of chasing anything in life by himself because he was very shy about trying. So when we really applied a reductionist lens to that, I was like, understanding him as a person, he was actually just very shy and being lonely, didn't like to be alone or by himself. So one of the things that I had him do was pick out a location of interest as something that he likes and to just go do it gradually by himself. So one week it was like, go to the arcade. He's a big nerd like me. So I'm like, go to the arcade late at night. It doesn't have to be when it's busy. The mall stays open till 11 o'clock. Go there half an hour on a day off or a Saturday just to relax, chill out, have fun. Did it, loved it. Take yourself to dinner. Go to a steakhouse. Go to someone that's actually dined in. Cool, loved it. Go do half a day at the beach. Cool, loved it. And gradually, those exposures are getting bigger and bigger based on the fear that he had initially. And what I found is he become more confident in other areas of his work life. He's pushing more goals. He's progressing in life, which in turn, I found him able to progress in his training. He came from an anorexic background. He was 40 kilos at the age of I think 17. He's now
mm,
we just finished his first growth phase. We got to 80 kilos, literally doubled his body weight. Went through a cut, got down to 70 kilos. Like the first time he's ever done a structured cut before. All these things where he's a lot more confident to do these things because we're deliberately more than the physiology side, psychologically identifying a fear. If you don't have time to go do that, I think a really powerful thing that people are scared of doing is internal introspection. Sit down and ask yourself what you're not doing well. What are you not exposing yourself to? What are you scared of? What are you worried about? What can you do better? Where are you failing? Let yourself down. Where are you not living up to your own standards? Whilst it doesn't seem physiologically taxing, psychologically, that ability at first is going to be very surface level. It's going to suck. It's going to be, you won't be able to get very far. Over time, this journaling prompt, this just journaling behavior, this introspection, when tailored and done consistently, you're going to unravel deeper and deeper levels of yourself, and the body is going to want to resist it. And that is going to be where the friction point is to psychological development. You're going to find that you can get a little bit deeper, there's resistance. A little bit deeper, resistance. What is that like? Any other form of training that we do. You get a little bit stronger, and the resistance, a plateau. A little bit stronger, it's a plateau. A little bit stronger, progressive overload, so on. So for me, that's a huge one that Dr. Peterson talks about, Jordan Peterson. If you don't know where to start, sit on the end of your bed one night and ask yourself where you're sucking. Ask yourself
mm,
where you'll let yourself down and implement that weekly, daily, like every second day if you need to. That is a very low physiological yield fatigue generator but psychologically leads to huge levels of development that you show yourself, you expose those greater degrees of difficulty, and also produce a reference point for where you can improve. Most people deep down, though they don't do it, know where they suck. They know where they're lapsing, where they're lacking, where they're holding back and not committing themselves. Run that exercise. A, you're going to feel crap at first. You're going to feel like it's not doing anything. Then it's going to feel hard. Then you're going to go, oh, it's working.
Love it. Awesome. Where can people find out more about you, all the programs and everything you guys do? I know you got a lot of stuff going on there.
Yeah, so at the moment you can find us on matterathletica.com. You can find the YouTube Matter Athletica. You can find my Instagram, Ben_Mayfield Smith. You can find the Matter Athletica Instagram with the same name. From there, you can sign up to our email list. A certain person on this podcast really pushed us to make sure we're putting out email blasts. I think that's going really well. We try to take these concepts. We have now what we call the Matter micro lessons. I try to every 2 weeks we produce a 60-second, like a 1 minute snippet information piece, an actionable takeaway with a psychological concept or performance concept you can implement. We have weekly blogs, monthly blogs, ebooks, articles, all up there as well. So we've got a lot of stuff out, and there's also our podcast channel as well, Matter Athletica on Spotify. So there's a lot of stuff, free content, free engagement and interaction, and we just like to give stuff out.
And who do you primarily work with? 'Cause I know you've got some corporate programs. I know you have individual programs also, correct?
Yeah, so we have just finished up a corporate wellness program, more like a cultural development and wellness program that we built out for a company here in Australia. We've standardized and we operationalized that, so we're running that as well. And then we've got a spectrum of body composition and performance clients, right from national level bodybuilders to performance athletes, individual sports, team sports, and then general body composition populations as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. And yeah, I had a physique athlete that just competed this last weekend and she did great. And Ben was super, super helpful for me to bounce ideas off and get his opinion, and it was awesome to have your support on that too, because it's a never ending thing. And especially with clients you're so close to and you know how much work and everything they've put in.
Yeah.
I know I'm so biased in one direction. So even
Yeah.
just for mentorship and to have people you can bounce ideas off and hire them, pay them for their time, it's super, super beneficial. That's probably one thing I wish I would have done earlier in my career is just the simple thing of realizing, oh, if I don't know someone and I really want their opinion, I can just pay them for a consult. What a novel idea. It's like, even if that client, I lose money on them on 1 month, I'm going to make that money back on future clients. Even if I had clients originally that I didn't make any money on at all, I can then keep that knowledge and parlay that into the future. So one thing, if you're a coach listening to this podcast, I would say one of the mistakes I made early on is one, just not even simply realizing that. If you have issues, you have problems. I know you do one-off consulting and other programs too. Look up people and pay them for their time, and it'll be more than worth it long term too. So I'll throw that in for you.
100% agree.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. This was great, and we will chat with you all soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate you having me.
Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. Really appreciate it. Huge thanks to my buddy Ben for all the wonderful knowledge he's shared with you here. Make sure to check out all the wonderful things he has on his YouTube channel, Instagram. He's got a newsletter going too. Lots of wonderful stuff, so be sure to check out all the great stuff that he has going on there. So huge thanks to him for being on the podcast again, sharing all of the knowledge that he has acquired over many years. If you're interested in acquiring more knowledge, check out the Flex Diet certification. It opens again June 16th this year, so coming right up. Best place to go is onto the exclusive free insider newsletter. We'll put a link down below. We've got some very cool fast action bonuses, other bonus items once again. This is the only time it'll be open probably this year. I think we'll have the physiological flexibility cert open again in fall. And then as of now, the Flex Diet cert doesn't open again until January of next year. So check that out in the newsletter. Sign up below. This is your certification if you're interested in metabolic flexibility meets flexible dieting. We have 8 interventions ranging from protein, fats, carbohydrates, all the way to NEAT, fasting, micronutrition, exercise, sleep, and much, much more. This is done on a habits base, so you don't have to worry about counting macros. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I just find that a habit-based approach is a much better starting point for individuals. We have a big picture that'll explain to you the concept of metabolic flexibility and flexible dieting. We've got 8 intervention modules where I've got 1 hour to tell you all the technical details about protein, how carbohydrates work, sleep, etc., all based on a ton of research, but explained in a way you can actually understand it. And then we have 40 explicit action items throughout the cert, so you'll also know exactly how to apply it within a flexible framework for clients. So you'll learn the big picture, the context, you'll learn the details, so you're educated and you can make the best decisions, but then we'll also guide you through a flexible framework using exact action steps that you can apply with yourself or your clients. So you'll have not only the knowledge, but you'll know how to apply it. And for this round also, you'll get direct access to me. So if you have any questions during the certification, you'll be able to email me directly, and I'll do whatever I can to help you out. So how about the newsletter if you're interested in that? Thank you so much for listening. We've also got, if you want ketones, check out Tecton. If you want electrolytes, check out our friends at Element. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. We really appreciate it. If you could take just 30 seconds and give us a like, download, subscribe, leave us some stars, review, all that stuff makes a huge difference in helping us with distribution of the podcast. Thank you so much. Talk to all of you next week.
Hey, what are you doing? I dropped my gum. Hey, lady, would you toss my gum up? You could have taken it out of the wig first.
This podcast is for informational purposes only. The podcast is not intended as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. You should not use the information on the podcast for diagnosing or treating a health problem or disease or prescribing any medication or other treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider before taking any medication or nutritional supplement, and with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this or any other podcast. Reliance on the podcast is solely at your own risk. Information provided on the podcast does not create a doctor-patient relationship between you and any of the health professionals affiliated with our podcast. Information and statements regarding dietary supplements are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guest qualifications or credibility. Individuals on this podcast may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to therein. If you think you have a medical problem, consult a licensed physician.